Hello friends, I know it's a little late, but welcome to my March setup video. I actually set these spreads up quite a bit before March, but I was overseas on holiday, so I only got to edit this video after I came back. My theme for this month is vineyards, and this was inspired from my holiday in Australia when I managed to see some great vineyards, and the vineyards were so beautiful and I just wanted to replicate that. This was painted before my trip though, so I just used different photos on Pinterest for my reference for the cover page. Once again, I am using my Himimiya gouache, and this has been my go-to medium for all my monthly setups this year thus far. I tried to make the colors as bright and pastel as possible, so I added quite a little bit of white into my blue color to make the sky lighter, and then I did a little bit of gradient where it gradually became lighter in color as it progressed downwards. And I just did this by adding more white to the blue as I painted. I feel like this gives more interest to the sky rather than it just being a singular shade of blue. And then I just laid down the rough colors first before moving on to working on the finer details. I started off with the darkest colors first, as always, before slowly building it up with lighter colors. The grass area was slightly tedious to do, but after a while I started to get faster at doing it. And how I decided to tackle such a large area of grass was to paint the darkest areas first, and then going back in with a slightly lighter shade of green, but also painting it in sections. Finally, when I got to the lighter colors, I started to paint it in tiny strokes with my small detail brush to give the texture of grass, then lastly went back in with the lightest color to get the highlights in. I only started doing this maybe in the middle of the painting because I got too tired of painting the strands of grass, but yes, I would recommend painting in chunks first instead of being like me and being very inefficient. And I also feel like it kind of gives a better look to the grass anyway, rather than painting it all in strands. And this was a simpler painting in the sense that there are lesser details to take note of. However, because of that, I felt like it was more difficult to paint this. I was struggling a little bit with how empty this painting looked, and so kept going back and forth with trying to add details to it. But I think at the end of the day, I just wanted to bring forth the idea of a bright vineyard, focusing more on the overall picture rather than the details. I wasn't super happy with this painting, if I'm being honest. I hope that I'll have a chance to redo this painting in the future. But yeah, I had such a good time in Australia, and the grapes at the vineyards were all so big and delicious. I've never seen them before in my life. And it was just such a good break from work and life in general. And I am getting some serious withdrawal symptoms now that I'm back to real life. And after I am done with my cover page, I decided to just stick it directly into my bullet journal with double-sided tape. And then I was working on my calendar spread as well. Similar to January and February, I also decided to section off a small portion of the page at the top to do a similar painting in the same theme as my cover page. And once again, I used watercolor as well. I just painted a light blue color and then used a tissue to kind of pick up some of the paint to give the idea of wispy clouds as well. And I wanted it to be really subtle, so I didn't go back in with a white gouache or anything. I just kind of left it as is, and certain areas that I wanted to become lighter after the paint fully dried, I just went back in with a wet brush to reactivate the paint and then kind of lifted it off with a dry brush. And after that is done, I was coloring in the dates on the left hand side with an acrylograph pen, and then went back in with a second acrylograph pen to just write in all the different dates. And normally for the first 2 months, I would add a little highlight as well to kind of demarcate where the weekends were. But this time around, I felt like it would be a little too much because I already kind of colored the left hand side. So instead, I decided to use a blue acrylograph pen to draw 2 lines beside the dates, and this would just mean that those dates with lines are the weekends, and it's easier to tell which day the date falls on, if that makes sense. And also, since I spent the first week of March in Australia, I didn't want to set up my first weekly spread. I wanted to do more of a travel light journal for my first week of March, so I left it blank and filled it out with photos and memories from my time in Australia after I came back. As such, instead of setting up a weekly spread, I decided to do a quote page instead, as well as another small painting. I worked on the painting first, and this time around I decided to paint the grapes themselves. I started off with a watercolor background, and this added so much more to the painting in my opinion. After it was completely dry, I started to paint the grapes first, and this painting was really simple to do and really fun as well. I went with a violet indigo-ish color because I thought it was a really pretty color, and I just went in with my round brush and painted random oval blobs overlapping each other. Then I went back with a darker shade to get the shadows in, and also to make the individual grapes more distinct from each other. I built up the different colors when the previous coat is completely dry so that the colors wouldn't end up becoming muddy, and then I just used a slightly damp but clean brush to blend the different shades together. But of course, be careful not to over blend the colors or to use too wet a brush, as it will end up reactivating the colors too much and it ends up lifting them off the page a little bit. I feel like the highlights really brought the grapes out, and I feel like it gave life to the whole painting, and I really loved how the stem turned out too. I thought this painting turned out so cute, and I ended up liking it way more than my cover page. And after I was done with my painting, I started working on my quote page on the left hand side, and it says, "Always take the scenic route." I thought it was quite appropriate in light of the traveling I did in March, and it's just a good reminder as well in general. And that's all I have for this video. Here is how they look like. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!